Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Marvel. I have a check-in system and turn into God on Earth. Chapter 21. You think I really can't help you? Tony looked at Lululin with a somewhat unkind expression. When you go bankrupt, I will naturally be able to buy your bar easily. And I, soon can bankrupt you. Well, even if I can go bankrupt, then what? Lulin laughed and said, even if I go bankrupt tomorrow. No, even if I go bankrupt tonight, you still can't buy my bar now. At this moment, now, whether it is 10 million or 100 million, it makes no difference to you, you can't buy my bar. Doesn't that prove that money is not omnipotent? Poor Stark, please remember that a person's success in life is not measured by the amount of money. Haha, it's ridiculous. If money can't be used to measure a person's success, then what else can be used to measure a person's success? Stark looked at Lulin and scoffed, could it be a degree? He let out a loud laugh. I'm sorry, I graduated from MIT with a PhD in physics, a PhD in engineering, and a PhD in electrical engineering, 3 PhDs. I have made countless inventions and achievements in my life, and I don't even bother to look at the awards I have won. And you, my friend, tell me, what kind of achievements have you had? Isn't that enough proof that I'm better than you? Good, good. Lulin applauded gently. You are indeed very powerful. I'm sorry to tell you, I never went to school, I went through homeschooling. Lulin said with a smile. Your achievements are indeed unmatched, but have you made any contributions to mankind? If the contributions you are talking about are the weapons you invented and manufactured, then all I can say is that you are pathetic. Pathetic. Stark found it a little puzzling. The weapons I invented allowed the United States to maintain peace around the world. You call me pathetic. Isn't what I've done, my contribution to peace, not enough proof of my contribution to humanity? The world's largest arms dealer claims to have made an unparalleled contribution to peace. Lulin laughed. I've never heard of anything funnier than this. Oh yes, this young lady next to you may know some relevant information and news, why don't you ask this reporter, miss? Christina looked at the two men who were arguing strangely, feeling that the two were a little unreasonable. How did things get to this point? But when Lulin brought the topic to her, Christina suddenly felt as if she had been smashed by a pie falling from the sky. In recent times, she has been following news about Stark's arms sales in the Middle East. The terrorists there are said to have used weapons made by Stark. Christina already has quite a lot of evidence to prove that this is not a rumor at all. This time I came here to see if I could have the opportunity to blend in with the Stark building and interview one or two heavyweight figures. It would be nice to get some evidence that Stark was dealing arms with terrorists. Christina never imagined that she would just try her luck at the door of Stark Mansion and actually transfer Stark himself. What's more, now she actually has the opportunity to interview Stark himself. That's right, Mr. Stark, I have evidence that some terrorists in the Middle East use weapons produced by Stark. How do you explain this? Christina quickly pulled out the evidence she had, including photos and even videos. What? That's impossible, Stark said in disbelief. Ridiculous, ridiculous, how could Stark make a deal with terrorists? Even if you two want to frame me, this method is too inferior. Stark sneered, not reading the materials handed over by the female reporter. Just as Stark was about to leave, he suddenly noticed the phone number with the female reporter's red lips printed on Lulin's hand. Seeing this, Stark suddenly changed his mind. He came to this bar to have fun. He had heard that there was a beautiful woman in this bar with a very different taste. But when he walked in, he only saw the female reporter in front of the bar and Sif, who was bartending in the bar. Due to the dim light, he could not see Sif's face clearly, and Sif's figure was not at all the type he liked. His attention was quickly drawn to Lulin. He absolutely can't tolerate someone whose charm is actually stronger than his own. Even Stark had to admit that from a temperament point of view alone, he completely lost to Lulin. After all, Lulin is the Prince of Asgard, and the aristocratic elegance of his body has been obtained after hundreds of years of precipitation. How could Stark be compared to a mortal? This is also the reason why Stark has an inexplicable hostility towards Lulin. And because of Lulin's unrelenting personality, Tony's hostility towards Lulin has become even more serious. This is also the reason why the two began a fierce confrontation as soon as they met. Although Tony lost the first round of the meeting, so much so that he had to prepare to leave. But Tony felt as if he had found an opportunity to fight back. Wait, the note in his hand is, the female reporter glanced at the note in Llewellyn's hand, and then glanced at Tony, and she suddenly understood. Christina flashed an apologetic smile at Llewellyn, sorry. Then she took the note back and tore it to pieces. I wonder if I have the honor to share my interview experience with you. Christina straightened her hairstyle and smiled. Well, not bad. Tony glanced at Christina. I could give you a chance to know that your investigations are all false claims against Stark Industries. Stark smiled and put his arm around the female reporter's waist. Christina obediently left with Stark. Before leaving, Stark also flashed a defiant smile at Llewellyn. I won. Llewellyn saw Stark sitting in such a mouth shape. Have fun. Seeing the back of the two people leaving, Llewellyn suddenly remembered that this woman seemed to be the female reporter who interviewed Stark at the beginning of Iron Man. After thinking about this stubble, Llewellyn suddenly lost interest in this woman. He has no interest in second-hand goods that others have played with. Besides, this woman's figure looks very hot, but it is actually not very appetizing to Llewellyn. The so-called heartbeat only exists in that short moment just now. At the same time, at the fair not far away, Peter Parker happened to be bitten by a spider on the neck. At first he was unimpressed, but when he returned home, he passed out. When he wakes up again, Peter Parker discovers that he has superpowers. As for the latter things, needless to say, I think everyone already knows. The good neighbor of the New Yorkers, your friend Spider-Man, has appeared. His life experience is no different from before. After all, without those experiences, whether Spider-Man can become the real Spider-Man is another matter. The spider who has obtained superpowers tries to use superpowers to his advantage. Unexpectedly, this indirectly caused his dearest relatives to be injured and almost killed. The reason why it was almost because Llewellyn received a systematic task to save Peter Parker's uncle. Llewellyn had not made a move before because he had no idea when the little spider would be bitten by a spider and when there would be an accident. He can't keep staring at the little spider, can he? Isn't that perverted? As soon as he received the task of the system, Llewellyn immediately rushed to the scene. Saving a severely injured ordinary person may be extremely difficult for mortal medical conditions, but for Llewellyn, he only needs a magic spell to do it. Therefore, with the help of Llewellyn, who arrived in time, Uncle Ben was only seriously injured and persisted until the arrival of medical staff. Although bed rest is required for a short period of time, it is not life-threatening. Listen, Peter Parker, if you want to talk, I think I'm ready at any time. Ben looked at Peter Parker seriously and shook his hand heavily. Peter Parker hesitated for a long time, but finally did not tell the truth of the matter. He felt that it was better not to tell his family about this kind of thing. Because Peter Parker has decided to use his power to help innocent people. With great power comes great responsibility. This is what Uncle Ben told him when he was dying. Peter Parker could not imagine how things would have turned out if Mr. Llewellyn had not arrived in time. He couldn't even imagine what his future would look like because of his Uncle Ben's death. Peter Parker even thought that there are many people in this world who are suffering for various reasons. There may even be people like themselves who are suffering from the loss of their families. He decided to use his power to help these people. Even if only one of them can be saved, even if only one of the families can be saved. That's also a great thing. Peter Parker thought so. As a result, the citizens of New York suddenly discovered that a tight-fitting freak using spider silk jumped between cities appeared in the sky above the city. But this freak uses his abilities to help people. He fights criminals and helps people. This makes people start to think that it seems good to have such a freak. Light bar. Llewellyn looked at the speculation about Spider-Man's identity on TV and couldn't help but smile slightly. I don't understand why someone would be swinging between buildings in tights and masks. Tony weakly complained to Spider-Man on TV, if you want to be a hero, then why do you have to mask your face and hide yourself? That's stupid too. If it were me, I wouldn't hide my identity. Tony took a long sip of wine. As for why Tony appeared in Llewellyn's bar and was still at peace with Llewellyn, that's a long story. Since that day, Tony thought he had won Llewellyn's hand, and the next day he came back to show off. But who knew that Llewellyn didn't care about Tony's show-off, which made Tony feel very uncomfortable. He also wanted to fulfill his initial promise to buy Lurin's building. But he found that no matter how hard he tried, he could not make Lulin have the slightest fluctuation. This immediately made Tony interested in Lulin. He had never felt so frustrated since he became famous at a young age. Lulin even joked, "If you were a woman and you were interested in me, I might be happy, but if you were a man, forget it." Lurin's refusal didn't make Tony give up. Instead, he became more interested in Lulin. Therefore, his daily leisure now is to come to Lulin's bar to fight with Lulin, trying to prove that he is better than Lulin. Powerful in every sense of the word. But every time Lulin could choke him and couldn't speak. Tony became more and more courageous, so much so that now, he has become a regular visitor to the Bar of Light. Of course, what frustrated him the most was not Lulin's mockery, but Sif's disregard. After coming to the Bar of Light many times, Tony finally noticed the mesmerizing Valkyrie temperament in Sif. This led him to pursue Sif. But how could Sif, as an Asgard god, be interested in a mortal? What's more, her heart was full of Lulin. So Tony came to the Light Bar not so much to trouble Lulin, but to pursue Sif. But it's a pity that all his efforts, the winks he throws, Sif doesn't pay attention to at all. After all, Sif's eyes were all Lulin. This made Tony extremely depressed. In the matter of charm, he actually lost. Perhaps for this reason, Tony vaguely had a feeling of sympathy with Lulin. The two are now more like wrongdoers in daily bickering. Yes, Lulin nodded irrefutably. What do you mean by that? Tony was suddenly a little dissatisfied. Why, am I not right? What kind of hero is hiding his head? Looking at the street interview, someone called Spider-Man a hero, and Tony pouted disdainfully. Maybe this hero is just from an ordinary family. Lulin said lightly. You know, although he has superpowers, not his family also has superpowers. Lulin smiled and said, otherwise, what is that? Superpower of family. Lulin is telling the story of a superhero movie about a family with superpowers fighting the bad guys. Maybe, Tony said with some uncertainty. He also likes the movie Super Family. That's why he often comes to chat with Lulin. Because he found that there were many other aspects, not only hobbies, but also many other aspects. Lulin was always able to keep up with his brain circuits and connect his terriers when talking. Tony thought it was a wonderful feeling. He had never felt anything like it before. That's why he's willing to come and chat with Lulin all the time. God knows how difficult it is to talk to those ordinary people. In Tony's eyes, these people are not much different from monkeys. And those who can keep up with their own ideas, such as various scientists, are mostly very boring. And what Tony hates the most is all kinds of boring. Old-fashioned, boring. This made Tony not want to communicate with his peers at all. What's more, those so-called peers, in Tony's eyes, are actually not very different from the so-called monkeys. If he is an ordinary person, then it is undoubtedly a very dangerous thing for him to fight against all kinds of criminals like this. Lulin said lightly, especially for his family. Tony, you know that the country in the East has no laundry detergent, right? Lulin suddenly said. And in order to protect their families, even if these people sacrifice in their posts, they will not be able to get a decent funeral. Because if the person who trafficked laundry detergent discovers their identity, his family will suffer the most tragic reprisals. Why? Tony said, a little dumbfounded. They can't be sure if this dead man has anything to do with them, right? Where do they care if they kill innocent people? Lulin said lightly. They just want to vent their emotions. Lulin glanced at Tony. Imagine what Spider-Man's criminals would do when they discovered his true identity. For example, if the small leader of a gang is sent in by Spider-Man, then in order to avenge his subordinates, you guess the boss of this gang will not attack Spider-Man's family. You shouldn't expect so-called criminals to have a conscience, right? Tony was silent, because he found that Lulin was not wrong at all. 10,000 steps back, if you, Tony, became a hero, you could indeed not be afraid of retaliation from those people, but what about your loved ones, your lovers? Ha, don't worry, I don't have any relatives and lovers anymore. Tony said without care. If I become a hero, these criminals will find that they can't find anyone to take revenge on. Ha, that's ironic. Really? Lulin smiled faintly. Do you really have no so-called important people? I heard you have a good relationship with Obadiah. What if he was retaliated against? Lu Lin smiled and said, and your little secretary. Hee hee, don't say that, I don't have a half-dime relationship with my secretary. Tony explained nervously. Yes, Lu Lin shrugged. Then don't mention your little secretary. In short, if you don't have someone you value now, won't you always have one in the future? Lu Lin said lightly. Those people will always find an opportunity as long as they want to take revenge on you, so don't take it lightly. The world is never safe, Tony, especially for ordinary people. Yes, Tony said with some indifference. I think you're a little too worried. No, you'll find out soon. Lu Lin pointed to Spider-Man on the TV and said, now there is a freak flying around in the sky, and there may be anything in the future. You see, let's say me, a living alien prince standing in front of you. Come on. Tony rolled his eyes. Less alien prince, I don't believe your nonsense. What's next? Demon, or the devil? Tony let out a loud scoff. Just then, Peter Parker pushed the door and walked in. Hey Peter Parker, why are you here? Lu Lin smiled. I'm here to thank you for your help. Peter Parker said a little restrained. He took out a handmade cookie from the backpack behind him. This is the cookie I made by Aunt May. She took care of Uncle Ben in the hospital, and she couldn't thank you personally, so I had to come. Peter Parker rubbed his hands. If you hadn't helped me save the ambulance that day, I really don't know what would have happened. You are a hero, Mr. Lurin. Oh roar, my God, you're still a hero. Tony applauded. I didn't even know there was such a thing. It's amazing. It's just a show of hands, don't mind. Lu Lin said lightly. Also, thank you for introducing me to the job, now I have a lot more money on hand. Peter Parker scratched his head and laughed. You really are my great benefactor. Don't care. Lu Lin smiled slightly and took the cookie from Peter Parker's hand. I'll take the cookie. Lu Lin took a deep look at Peter Parker. If you have anything you want to talk to me about, I can accompany you at any time. Lulin could see that Peter Parker's state seemed to be a little wrong lately, and he had heavy dark circles around his eyes. Obviously, being Spider-Man is not such a simple thing. For Peter Parker, he seems to have some difficulty balancing the identity balance between Spider-Man and ordinary Peter Parker. Peter Parker didn't know if Lu Lin saw something, and suddenly felt a little weak. Ha, I don't have anything to talk about. Peter Parker said a little nervously. Hey kid, you almost wrote on your face that I had something to hide from everyone. Tony teased. It's not that you lied. Only at this time did Peter Parker notice that it was the famous Mr. Stark who had been sitting next to him. Oh my God, you are, Stark. Peter Parker said with some shock. You. Hey, be quiet, kid. The smug look on Tony's face could hardly be hidden. I know you're excited to see me, but you don't need to be so excited. Oh my God, I'm so excited, you're my idol. Peter Parker said excitedly. You know what, I just admire it so much, what you proposed, Peter. Parker's speech was extremely fast, like a submachine gun, clicking non-stop. It was the first time Tony had seen such an avid fan of his own, and he was still a teenager, not one of those women without brains. This child still worships himself because of his outstanding achievements, not because of how rich he is. This greatly satisfied Stark's vanity. He even took the time to glance at Lu Lin, and the meaning was self-evident. When Peter Parker walked out of the bar, he was dizzy. He never imagined that he would actually see his idol like this. Excited, he even forgot the good news he was going to tell Lu Lin in the first place, and he didn't remember it until he walked out the door. Forget it, let's tell Mr. Lu Lin next time. Peter Parker glanced at the time and slammed his head. Oops, I'm going to be late. He recently got an internship under the famous Dr. Octavius. This is undoubtedly extremely valuable for a high school student. No one else at this age can do such amazing things. Most high school students at this age are still worried about middle school math. The opportunity to intern in Dr. Octavius' lab was very important to Peter Parker. This helped him quite a bit later in applying to college. If Dr. Octavius could add a few good comments to his evaluation, it would undoubtedly be much easier for him to look at the university he had in mind in the future. That's why Peter Parker values this internship opportunity. Recently Octavius was working on a robotic arm assist system. It is said that this assistance system can even change the world. At the same time, Octavius was also working on artificial nuclear fusion, the fabled artificial sun project. Once this project is completed, the entire human race will have an endless supply of clean energy to use. Either of these two projects is a very profound project for Peter Parker. He was only fighting under Dr. Octavius. But even so, it was enough for him to be proud. You know, not to mention high school students, even many graduate students who have successfully obtained a degree are difficult to get Dr. Octavius's eyes. So it's normal for Peter Parker to be proud of this resume. And today, it's the day Dr. Octavius experimented with his own auxiliary arm. After several years of development, Octavius finally created an auxiliary arm of his own that could help him with his experiments. Part of this auxiliary arm uses cutting-edge nanotechnology, which greatly improves the ductility of the robotic arm. In order to improve the convenience of the robotic arm, Octavius even compiled a special auxiliary program for the robotic arm. What Octavius didn't know, however, was that perhaps there was a problem with the underlying code, which caused his robotic arm to be inherently destructive. This is a logical guideline that is determined by the underlying code architecture. Although it is not impossible to change, the evil of the mechanical arm actually depends largely on the psychological state of the user. If the user's mental state is not good and mentally inclined to mania, then there is no doubt that this mechanical tentacle will be the most evil auxiliary tool in the world. This is due to Dr. Octavius' ability to think for himself when coding for convenience. If left unchecked, tentacles will surely grow into evil tools that cannot be restrained in a short period of time. But fortunately, Octavius' caution helped him. He wrote the protection program in advance. Without Dr. Octavius' permission, the mechanical tentacles did not show any aggression at all. Hey, Dr. Octavius, it looks like your experiment has been successful. Peter Parker rushed to the lab panting, and he looked at Octavius with some pleasure. It's cool, can I touch him? Of course, I'll just wait for you to come. Dr. Octavius said with a gentle smile. I want you to help me load him up and help me start him. You know, Parker, if this experiment is successful, then this invention will benefit countless people with disabilities. At the same time, my research will also take a big step forward, which will save me countless money for my experiments. In Dr. Octavius' vision, mechanical tentacles could help people with unsound limbs become normal people again. Even normal people can use mechanical tentacles to do things they can't usually do. In Dr. Octavius' vision, mechanical tentacles might even replace normal limbs in the future. Just as tails are as important to some monkeys. In Dr. Octavius' vision, these mechanical tentacles will one day become the tail of mankind and an indispensable auxiliary tool for people. This will be the first stone axe made by primitive people. However, Dr. Octavius was too excited to notice the biggest cost problem. The cost of mechanical tentacles has reached almost $1 million. This study alone drew nearly half of Dr. Octavius' experimental funding. Even if it can be mass-produced in the future, the minimum cost can only be compressed to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And what is the concept of hundreds of thousands of dollars? The cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars is an amount that 99% of people in this world cannot afford. Therefore, mechanical tentacles are destined to become toys for the rich in the future, lethal weapons of the military. And the cost of this product has no room to continue to decline. Because at the time of manufacturing, Octavius used a certain amount of nanotechnology. In this era, nanotechnology is undoubtedly the most cutting-edge technology. Countless researchers and scholars are still in the dark, but Dr. Octavius has put it into use. This speaks volumes about the genius of Dr. Octavius. If Tony meets Dr. Octavius, I believe Tony and Octavius will have a lot of common topics. On the other hand, Peter Parker, who was painted by Octavius, did not feel unreliable. After all, he is just an ordinary high school student, and he is not aware of the ugliness of the capital world at all. Parker was thrilled to see this great technology come to life. Soon, everything was ready. Peter Parker's fingers floated on the computer's keyboard, and he couldn't help but feel a little nervous looking at the progress bar on the screen. After gently pressing the enter button, the entire system of the tentacles is directly activated. Since this technology is directly connected to the brain through the spine, this is to facilitate the human brain to control the tentacles easily and quickly. After all, Dr. Octavius originally intended to see tentacles as additional extensions of the human body. In experiments, many times it is necessary for researchers to study quickly, or stop the experiment, or carry out experimental operations. A little slower, it may lead to the failure of the experiment, or even various irreparable accidents. So the delay is undoubtedly unacceptable for Dr. Octavius. That's why he connects mechanical tentacles directly through spinal nerves to the brain. This also leads to the failure of the experiment, which will cause irreparable damage to the human nerves. Do it, Peter Parker. Dr. Octavius lay on the bed and encouraged loudly. Don't worry, I've taken all the precautions, and I've done dozens of simulation experiments. Rest assured, the experiment will be successful. It's not so much encouraging Parker as it's encouraging yourself. Dr. Octavius is optimistic about the young man Parker. He saw in Parker the shadow of his youth. Therefore, he was willing to give Peter Parker the opportunity to start the system. Otherwise, how could so many researchers in his lab be reduced to the point of using a high school student? It was because he was so confident in his experiments that Dr. Octavius gave this task to Parker. Because a high school student is actually not equipped to deal with emergencies. Peter Parker swallowed a mouthful of saliva with difficulty, and then nodded heavily. Dr. Octavius, I'm ready, Parker yelled, as if to cheer himself on, and he tapped down the keyboard heavily. With a click, the lights behind Dr. Octavius lit up one by one. The bionic spine suddenly fit his back, and at the same time, silver needles connecting nerves popped out at the same time, and then pierced his spine heavily. In the next second, all the indicators lit up one by one again, following the continuous flickering of Octavius' breathing, as if he had a life of his own. The four tentacle-like robotic arms behind Dr. Octavius instantly began to move. It's just that because it is the first time to access the nervous system, the robotic arm seems to be a little uncontrollable, flying everywhere in the air. Doctor, do you need me to press the emergency button? Seeing this scene, Peter Parker suddenly became nervous. He shouted, but his fingers floated on the keyboard. As soon as he discovers that something is wrong, he immediately terminates the experiment. But Parker doesn't dare to act rashly now, for fear that the accident will eventually hurt the spinal nerves of Octavius. You know, this place is still a forbidden area for humans, and if there is any accident here, nothing can save him. Once the experiment is forcibly terminated, it is likely to cause Dr. Octavius to spend the rest of his life with a wheelchair. No need to terminate the experiment. He just, somewhat uneasy. Dr. Octavius turned and smiled gently. Under the comfort of Octavius, soon the four robotic arms quieted down. They stayed very meekly at Dr. Octavius's side, dancing gently. Phew, it scares me to death, Peter Parker said with trepidation. I almost thought I was going to fail. Parker circled around Dr. Octavius, carefully observing the robotic arms, and couldn't stop praising from his mouth. Doctor, look at your current appearance, it's really a bit like an octopus. It's better if I call you Dr. Octopus in the future. Peter Parker joked with some exaggeration. Dr. Octopus. Dr. Octavius repeated Peter Parker's words, a smile appearing on his lips. He nodded slightly. I like the name. You can call me Dr. Octopus later. A weird smile appeared at the corner of Dr. Octopus's mouth. That smile made people feel uncomfortable for a while, as if Dr. Octavius in front of him with the appearance of the mechanical arm, the whole person's personality also changed strangely. Parker, however, who had been paying attention to the robotic arm, didn't notice this. Suddenly, a flash of essence flashed in Peter Parker's mind. His spider sense was activated. Spider sensing is a strange feeling that Parker discovers after he has superpowers. It was a wonderful feeling, which allowed him to sense the impending danger. Parker deduced that this should be modeled after the vibration of the spider's web after being collided with the outside world, and the superpower that can sense danger in advance when danger comes. He can perceive his surroundings through his superhuman senses, and then make senses about danger. Simply put, it is to anticipate danger. However, Parker's spider sensing only lasted for a short moment, and soon disappeared. This made him almost think that it was completely his illusion just now. But spider induction will not be activated for no reason, something must be happening around. Doctor, since your experiment is successful, I still have business, then go first. Parker said hello and then packed up his things to leave. Okay, since you have something urgent, let's go first, and I'll tell you the details of the experiment later. Peter Parker nodded and quickly left the lab, trying to figure out why his spider sensing was activated. However, just after Peter Parker left, that strange smile appeared on the corner of Dr. Octopus's mouth again. Peter, my little Peter Parker, it seems that you are not an ordinary person either. After connecting with the tentacles, Dr. Octopus found that his nervous system was amazingly strengthened. His perception of his surroundings reached an extremely acute level. This perception even made him feel very uncomfortable at first. But after getting used to it, he found that the feeling was so wonderful. Dr. Octopus was very keen to notice that just now, when the tentacles first lost control, Peter Parker shows a reaction speed far beyond what ordinary people can have. On the other hand, when Peter Parker left the lab, the spider induction disappeared completely and never appeared again. This made him depressed for a while. Parker trusts his spider senses. Whenever the spider induction is activated, there must be something around him that deserves his attention. There have never been any exceptions. But this time, without warning, it also disappeared inexplicably. Peter Parker was puzzled. At the same time, Lulin's magical research is in a bottleneck. In this short time on Earth, he has not been idle. Although he could not exercise all day, Lulin's research on magic was carried out every day. This is also the reason why he is strong. He never gave up his thirst for strength. It's just that recent magical research has fallen into a bottleneck. Because Lulin found that one of the magic materials he needed had run out. This magical material is very scarce, and even Odin's treasure inventory is not very large. This time he came to Earth, Lulin brought out almost all the inventory that could be brought out. What can I do about this? Lulin couldn't help but feel a little distressed. In order to buy these materials, Lulin had only one choice left, that is, to go to the Void Land to buy magic materials himself. The Void Land is the black market of the entire universe, in which everything can be bought. Only you can't think of it, there is absolutely nothing you can't buy. Therefore, Lulin decided to let Sif help him see the bar for 2 days, and he personally went to the Void to buy magical materials. Sif didn't mind at all. Isn't it just watching a bar for 2 days, it's not a thing at all. Just as Lulin was about to leave, Tony walked in. Oh Roar, my friend, looking at the way you pack your things, are you planning to go far away? Tony looked drunk, obviously just drunk. I'm going on an interstellar trip, why, do you want to come with me? Lulin looked at Tony with some amusement. He suddenly became ill-interested. Lulin wondered what would happen if he brought Tony into the universe at this time. If at this point in time, Tony goes to the universe, sees what happens in the universe, and comes into contact with the technology in the universe, what kind of changes will this bring to Tony? Ha, are you still unwilling to give up your set of statements about what prince and what god race? Tony scoffed. I'd rather see how long your lies can last. Lulin smiled urgently. In that case, then you come with me. Asgard also has ships capable of interstellar travel. It's just that Lulin generally uses the Rainbow Bridge when they travel, and they don't use all kinds of spaceships and warships at all. Even ordinary people have magical creatures such as Pegasus to choose from. So although Asgard also has spaceships, they are generally placed in warehouses to eat ashes. This time it came out, Lulin drove out for fun. When he stepped onto the spaceship, Tony still did not forget to laugh. What you did in this scene doesn't look fake at all. Tony touched the spaceship and burped. I didn't expect that you really laid down your blood in order to lie. Sit down, we're going. Lulin smiled faintly and pressed the start button of the spacecraft. A strong push-back sensation came instantly. Asgard's technology naturally goes without saying that in the process of flying into the universe, the human body does not need to bear too much gravity. At this moment, Tony still refuses to believe what is happening in front of him. In just a few minutes, the spacecraft had already rushed out of the atmosphere. Tony rubbed his eyes vigorously. Am I stunned? How do I see that we are in the universe? Sit down, buckle up, and we're going to start the wormhole ride. Tony was holding the trash can, and he was about to throw his intestines out. At this moment, the spaceship is floating in the universe. How does it feel? Lulin said with a faint smile. Did you give me some medicine? Tony said with difficulty. Why do I feel so uncomfortable? Normally, the first time humans perform wormhole crossing, they will indeed feel this way. As he spoke, the spacecraft gradually docked. Be careful, it's quite dangerous here, especially for ordinary Earth humans like you. Stepping off the spaceship, Tony saw something he would never forget in his life. All kinds of strange aliens, all kinds of gorgeous decorations, he is dizzy. That faint feeling of weightlessness reminded Tony that they were no longer on Earth. Others may be fake, such as these aliens, or they may be holster actors invited by people. But that feeling of weightlessness can't be fake. There are also those constellations in the sky. Tony recognized at a glance, he is no longer in the original universe. It's actually true. Tony looked at everything in front of him in disbelief. He felt that his three views had been greatly impacted. Those dazzling alien technologies made Tony unable to take his eyes off. It turns out that the brilliant design he has always thought is nothing when put in the universe. Lu Lin pulled Tony and dangled in the void with interest. Although he was a prince of Asgard, he had never been to such a place. After all, the black market is not a good place. In the original book, Thor has never been to the void. If it weren't for the purchase of magical materials, Lu Lin might not have set foot in such a place for hundreds of thousands of years. It can only be said that it is worthy of being the most dirty place in the universe, and everything is sold here. Lu Lin even saw someone trading aliens not far away. It's a pity that these people don't quite fit Lu Lin's aesthetics. Looking at the appearance of those people who are firmly controlled by wearing collars, I don't think it's a guy to mess with. Of course, Lu Lin also abhors human trafficking. But he won't save people because of this. He is not the virgin, let alone the trafficked race and aliens. This kind of thing happens every day in the universe, and countless aliens are trafficked. Asgard is not going to be kind enough for this kind of thing. If it really wants to be saved, it will not only be hundreds of millions of people. Not to mention that there must be tens of billions. As long as it wasn't Asgardians or Earthlings who were trafficked, Lu Lin didn't bother with these things. And right under Lu Lin's nose, there was a prison break. A creature that looked very gentle and cute on the surface suddenly broke free of control and revealed its hideous face. It calmly left after the auction market went viral. Hunters and prey, who can say for sure? Meow. A cat bark suddenly sounded. Following the sound, Tony saw an orange cat looking at him curiously. Kitten. Tony was a little surprised. He smiled slightly and crouched down. How can there be such a creature as a kitten here? Under Tony's touch, the orange cat purred comfortably, which seemed to be extremely enjoyable. Seeing Tony petting the kitten, Lu Lin gradually discovered that something was wrong. In the void, how can there be such a creature as an orange cat on the earth? It seems to be a meta-devouring beast, right? Lu Lin said with some uncertainty. The orange cat tilted his head and looked at Lu Lin suspiciously. Hungry, want something to eat. The orange cat looked down and licked his paws, ignoring Lu Lin. Ha, it seems that you don't like kittens. Tony laughed. Lu Lin shook his head and prepared to leave. Put that little thing down, you never know what the creatures in the universe really are. No, you're too careful, aren't you? Tony said with some dissatisfaction. Have you forgotten what we just saw? Lu Lin glanced sideways at Tony. Recalling the cute creature's killing appearance just now, Tony silently put the cat down. However, as soon as the two took 2 steps forward, the orange cat also walked forward together. Are you going to come with us? Tony suddenly burst into a kind meow. The orange cat meowed, jumped sharply, and jumped onto Lu Lin's shoulder. Lu Lin looked at the orange cat with a defensive face, but the orange cat did not care at all, but tilted his head and looked at Lu Lin pitifully. Why don't you just take him? He looks very well behaved. Tony said with some uncertainty. You little one. Seeing this scene, Lu Lin sighed helplessly. He touched the orange cat's head helplessly. Follow me, give you a name, how about just calling you Big Tangerine? Big Orange meowed twice, seemingly endorsing the title. Then, the big orange purred, and his head rubbed around Lu Lin's neck, looking very well behaved. Although he wasn't sure if this orange cat was the legendary Yuan Eater beast, he was too well behaved. Not to mention Tony, even Lu Lin relented. So Lu Lin decided to adopt him. Then, Tony took the orange cat into his arms and teased softly. At this moment, not far away, a flash of fire rose into the sky. In an instant, the entire void land was in chaos. Hey, get ahead. Let's go, Star-Lord shouted and passed Lulin's side. Suddenly, Star-Lord suddenly realized something and turned to look at Tony. Wait, you're an Earthling. Is it okay to say? Tony glanced at Lulin. That's right, it's an Earthling, Lulin said lightly. Oh, Xingju's eyes lit up. Could it be that you were also caught? Is this Asgardian doing it? Star-Lord looked at Lulin with some wariness. No, how to say, we can be considered to be out for tourism. Lulin smiled and said, I brought my Earth friends out to rise to the world. Is that so? Star-Lord nodded suspiciously. In that case, what is the most popular golden song in the United States now, or that, he had been away from home for too long, desperate to know the news about his hometown. Hey, Star-Lord, that guy is going to catch up. A green-skinned alien shouted. At this time, Xingju had not yet left Yongdu's spaceship, and was still begging for a life under Yongdu's men. Wait a minute, let me talk to my fellow countrymen. Xingju said loudly, I'll catch up later. Where did we just talk? What happened to that who? Oh my god, did he win a Grammy Award? I'll just say, he must be the best. Just as Star-Lord was excitedly inquiring with Tony about things on Earth, the companion who had already left turned back at this time. Seeing several people returning, Xingju was very moved. Didn't I say I'd catch up with you later? You actually came back to pick me up, really, so impressed. Saying that, Xingju squeezed a few tears out of the corner of his eyes. Who knew that his companion directly gave Xingju a punch? A dark circle appeared on his right eye. Idiot, that person has chased back, don't hurry up and leave. Pulling Xingju, several people quickly left here. Wait, what's going on? How come there are still Earthlings in the universe? Tony was confused. How rare, Earthling. Lulin shrugged. There will always be all kinds of Earthlings who have been displaced due to unexpected circumstances, which is a normal thing. But this person is not ordinary at all. Lulin added in his heart. You mean to say that the Earth has long been infiltrated into a sieve? Tony looked a little serious. Can't say that. Lulin shook his head. In fact, there are still some aliens who have reached a cooperative relationship with the Earthlings. Let's say some refugees who have lost their homes. Like in the movie Men in Black. Tony said dumbfounded. I thought it was science fiction, but you told me it was a documentary. No, the difference with the Man in Black is quite big. Lulin shook his head and said, at least it's not that exaggerated. Wait, what about Big Tangerine? Tony suddenly exclaimed. Lulin then found that Big Orange didn't know when it disappeared. Forget it. He can live in this kind of place for so long without worrying about his safety. Lulin waved his hand and said. When Tony heard this, he couldn't help but be a little disappointed. Because it's so dangerous here, Tony isn't Iron Man yet, and Lulin doesn't dare to just let him wander around like that. So when buying magical materials, Lulin took Tony with him. He also bought Tony a lot of tech creations that interested him. Tony is still in love, but it's time for them to leave. However, not long after leaving the Void Land, a great battle took place in front of them. Not far away, Xingju and the others who had just met actually fought with a big monster. Waterfa, what kind of monster is that? Tony stared at the creature in front of him with wide eyes. He never knew that there was such a monster in the universe, which was not scientific at all. I'm not sure. Lulin shook his head. It's too far away, you can't see clearly, go, get closer and take a look. With that, Lulin drove the spaceship over. Suddenly, Lulin felt something. When I turned my head, I found a big orange cat. When did you guys get on board? Meow. The orange cat stretched and swaggered onto Lulin's shoulder. How did you hide it? Why didn't you see you? Lulin reached out and scooped it up. You guy, you won't steal my materials, will you? Lulin looked at the orange cat suspiciously. Saying that, Lulin rubbed Big Tangerine's head vigorously a few times. The big orange cat does not resist and is very well behaved. He stayed quietly in Lulin's arms. However, his eyes were staring directly at the battle not far away. Why, you also want to go over and have a good time? Lu Lin shook his head slightly. It's too dangerous for you over there. Nope. Big Orange meowed twice. Lu Lin felt a palpitating power from his body. After a quick glance just now, Lu Lin was still unsure. Now holding the orange cat in his arms, Lu Lin could clearly feel the huge power in its body. Obviously, Big Orange is not an ordinary creature. How can an ordinary creature have such terrifying power? Lu Lin directly determined that this orange cat was the legendary Yuan Eater beast. Ah, well, I forgot, you are a meta-eater. Lu Lin rubbed the little guy's head helplessly. What Yuan devouring beast? Tony looked at Lu Lin with some dissatisfaction. This is clearly the orange cat that has always been cute. Lu Lin was too lazy to take care of Tony. What he was curious about now was whether this Yuan Eater beast was the Yuan Eater beast inside Captain Marvel. If yes, doesn't that mean that Fury's eyes were blinded by this guy? Thinking of this, Lu Lin decided to adopt him. Even though he is a Yuan devouring beast, he is too cute. Moreover, he could still do that kind of pleasant thing in the future, which made Lu Lin unable to refuse to adopt him at all. Moreover, Lu Lin will always subconsciously treat it as a weak and helpless kitten. What's more, for Lu Lin, even the Yuan devouring beast is indeed just a harmless kitten. Shu knew this, so Big Orange was extremely well behaved in front of Lu Lin. Big Orange meowed twice, and along his shoulders, 4 cute white gloves crawled on top of his head. The cat is indeed a liquid creature. In such a small place above Lu Lin's head, it can shrink into a ball and squat firmly on top of Lu Lin's head. Du Wei's 2 front paws were held in his arms, lazily watching the battle not far away. The battle ended quickly, and Lu Lin also launched his spaceship to follow. Their next stop was the Star of Sorvaran, which had another magical material that Lu Lin needed. Due to their status as princes of Asgard and Lurin, they were personally received by the High Priest of Sorvaran. Coming to Sovlan Star, Tony is like Grandma Lu who has entered the Grand View Garden, watching everywhere. Due to Lu Lin's generosity, the deal between them was quickly agreed. During this time, Tony was not idle. He seemed to be attracted to the golden creatures of the planet. At this moment, he was hooking up with a maid in the palace. It's just that the maid doesn't pay attention to him at all, which makes Tony bored himself. Lu Lin snickered on the side, watching Tony make a mistake. The genes of the Sauron are all designed, so they don't need that backward way of reproduction. In their concept, there is also no such thing as desire, which the Earthlings know. So Tony's wink is destined to be thrown to the blind. And just when Lu Lin happily watched Tony make an ugly appearance, a maid with an extraordinary temperament came to his side. Prince of the mighty Asgard, the High Priest wishes to speak with you alone. High Priest Agatha. Lu Lin was slightly stunned. Find me to talk alone. Lu Lin instinctively felt a hint of something wrong. However, out of confidence in his own strength, he was happy to go to the appointment. Perhaps the High Priest just wanted to take this opportunity to show kindness to Asgard. After all, Asgard is powerful, but it is a recognized thing in the universe. The entire Star of Sorvaran is golden, as are the buildings here. Led by the maid, Lu Lin crossed the long golden corridor. The room at the end of the corridor is a wide room intertwined with gold and yellow. The maid then turned away without saying a word. Lu Lin didn't care either, but looked at the decoration in front of him. The decor here is extravagant. In the center of the room, there is a low bed. Duvet covers on the bed, pillows, all utensils are golden. Lu Lin stepped forward gently and touched the bed gently. Everywhere you start, it is soft, and a fragrant smell comes to your face. The smell is so good that people just want to plunge into this bed and get a good night's sleep. Lu Lin was a little surprised. It was the first time he had seen a bed of this material. Like it, this bed. Lu Lin turned back sharply, but he saw a very charming woman. The decoration on the original High Priest was so ornate that she could not even move on the throne in order to ensure symmetry. All in all, this is not Lurin's dish at all. But at this time, Aisha had already taken off the strange costume. In addition, her blonde hair hangs down and is unusually smooth. Except for her golden skin, she is no different from a human beauty. After missing those pompous ornaments, Lu Lin found that even from his aesthetic point of view, Aisha was definitely very beautiful. Of course, these should be thrown away from the color of the skin. After all, golden skin is not acceptable to anyone. But think about it, there are people on the earth who can accept black skin, and compared to that, golden skin is nothing. After all, the genes of the Sovlan starman are carefully modulated. When each Severin reaches adulthood, his body proportions float within a perfect standard range. While guaranteeing not losing personal characteristics, every Severin is a handsome man and woman in the standard sense. Except for the golden skin. Rather, the golden skin is a symbol of their noble blood. Aisha walked slowly to Lu Lin's side, her body only wearing a tulle nightdress. This makes her figure appear looming and breathtaking. I have to say that from Lu Lin's aesthetic point of view, Aisha's body proportion is really perfect. One more point is too much, and one less is too little. What are you looking for me for? Aisha stepped forward and gently placed her finger on Lu Lin's lips. This action made Lu Lin's lips dry for a while. The smell of Aisha's body continued to burrow into Lu Lin's nostrils, making Lu Lin almost unable to control himself. I want you to help me review my history. Review? History? Lu Lin was confused. What historical knowledge can I help you review? I don't know anything about the history of your sovereigns. As the Prince of Asgard, you should know, right? Aisha's eyebrows were lowered, and the style she inadvertently revealed made people feel moved. Lu Lin swallowed a mouthful of saliva with difficulty. I have to admit that the Sovlan starman does feel a little different. The blood of the Sovlan people is genetically modified, and because of this, we have long abandoned the traditional way of breeding. So, Lu Lin felt that he had guessed what the historical knowledge that Aisha wanted to help review herself. Now he only feels that his lips are a little dry. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva with difficulty. You mean you want me to help you review this knowledge? That's right. Aisha nodded and threw herself into Lu Lin's arms. I read from the book that there are usually other steps before doing this kind of thing, and to get started now. Aisha is 1.75 meters tall. But in front of Lu Lin's strong and Gundam body, Aisha seemed to be a weak little white rabbit. Aisha closed her eyes and raised her head slightly. Now, you can get started. Aisha's voice trembled a little. Looking at Aisha in his arms, Lu Lin was a little entangled. Whether the beast is inferior to the beast is a big question. Do you eat the meat that is delivered to your mouth? Lu Lin was tangled. If you push Aisha away now, doesn't it seem a little too unkind? The identity of the Prince of Asgard is so easy to use, can it directly make people throw themselves into their arms? Lu Lin muttered in his heart. I wonder, why did you choose me? Lu Lin whispered. Because you're in the genes of the Asgardian gods, or what? Aisha said of course. Lu Lin suddenly felt speechless. At a time like this, he didn't even know whether to say Aisha or anything else about her. At such a time, suddenly saying such things is actually a very annoying thing. But in fact, in the universe, this kind of saying is almost a concept like you look handsome on Earth. After all, aliens are all strange and cannot be viewed with the aesthetics of normal humans. In the universe, genes may be the only thing that can only be praised. In the end, Lu Lin decided to follow his heart's choice. Don't eat the meat that is delivered to the mouth, isn't that a fool? Of course, the main reason for Lu Lin to make this decision was that Aisha's gesture was indeed somewhat attractive to him. In front of outsiders, Aisha has always maintained the majesty of a high priest. But in front of Lu Lin, her gesture is like a little girl in love, which makes people feel pity. To be honest, few people can refuse such a person. After all, the Sovereign people have undergone genetic modification, and this genetically modified species can indeed greatly stimulate the desire in people's hearts. Lu Lin slowly hugged Aisha into his arms. A spring dinner is worth thousands of dollars. You can stand down. Aisha sat by the window and said lightly. It was as if she had become the high priest who sat high on the throne. Lu Lin was stunned when he heard this. He glanced at Aisha, who was sitting on the edge of the bed, and resumed her lofty posture, but he didn't know why, and he was a little unhappy. Are you so tough when you put on your clothes and talk? Lu Lin smiled helplessly. You are no longer of use to me. Aisha stood up, and was mercilessly ready to turn and leave. The transaction I promised you before, I can charge no fees. When Lu Lin heard this, a burst of anger suddenly appeared in his heart. What? Lu Lin's hand that was dressing stopped. What do you think of me? What is this? He was the gods of Asgard, the princes of Asgard. Isn't this act of giving money after finishing the matter saying that Lulin was voted? How could he endure such a thing happening? I have to show you some color today, otherwise I'm afraid you don't know the sky is high and the earth is thick. Lulin said viciously. Aisha next to him didn't take 2 steps, and the whole person took off into the air and flew back to the bed again. Lulin manipulated his divine power to fix Aisha. Come on, let you know what the Protoss of Asgard are. What? Wait, still coming. Aisha was shocked. Just now she was indeed very satisfied, but now, she is a little tired and really doesn't want to come again. To put it bluntly, the current Aisha is the time of the sages, so she will put on the appearance of the high priest. There is no plowed land, only tired cattle. But, for Lurin, these are bullshit. As long as he wants to, he can even fight non-stop. Asgard's combat power is not only reflected in fighting, in other aspects, Asgard's Protoss are just as fierce. However, Aisha still seemed a little unconvinced, and she was still hard-mouthed after the end. Lulin was not used to her appearance at all. If it were someone else, it is estimated that he might have been directly driven out by Aisha calling a maid. But during the battle, Lulin never saw Aisha make any attempt to call the maid in. This is enough to show that this woman is actually duplicitous. Lulin is not the kind of scumbag who ignores the wishes of others, and he is merciful when he does it. If Aisha really didn't want to, she wouldn't even need to use the genetically modified power in her body. She only needs a little more strength to break free. On the surface, she looks like she's been struggling, but in fact she's just pretending. And after being tossed back and forth several times, Aisha finally stopped talking hard. She faded her proud posture and quietly curled up in Lulin's arms, extremely well behaved and motionless. It's not that she doesn't want to move, but she doesn't have any strength now. Aisha is too tired. God knows why this man in front of him has such abundant physical strength, as if he were an indefatigable machine. Doesn't this man need to rest at all? How's that, are you still tough? Lulin looked at Aisha in his arms with a slight pride. Hard mouth is not a good habit, you have to change it. Lulin was not interested in poisonous tongues at all. If you want it, don't want it, what are you doing with so many useless things? And after getting used to Aisha's face, Lulin can enjoy Aisha's beauty. Lulin felt that he might now be able to understand humans interested in skin of all colors. When the charm reaches a certain level, skin color does not matter at all. At the very least, Lulin is looking at Aisha more and more now. Moreover, after throwing away the colored glasses, it has to be admitted that in terms of the delicacy of the facial features alone, Aisha is indeed very good looking. If it weren't for the weird religious costumes and the mess of ornaments, anyone who saw Aisha at first glance would have been attracted by her beauty. There is still some truth in the saying that people rely on clothes and horses on saddle. No matter how good-looking people are, they can't withstand such devastation. No matter who makes it look like that, it won't look good. People who have been genetically modified can't suppress that weird service, let alone others. In other words, when these costumes and ornaments are designed, they are designed to create a sense of separation from people. These costumes and ornaments were originally designed to isolate the high priest from ordinary people, so naturally they would not conform to the aesthetics of the public. What if I can't live without you now? Aisha said with a slight gasp. When she said this, her eyes were like silk, and Lulin's heart moved again. After what happened just now, she can be regarded as completely experiencing the joy of this kind of thing. In other words, she is now almost liberated by nature. After the liberation of nature, she no longer hid her desire for happiness and infatuation with Lulin in front of Lulin. In fact, from the beginning she had a somewhat crush on Lulin. It's just that she didn't show it at first. Come with me, what a simple thing. Lulin smiled slightly. Follow me, are you still afraid of having a bad life? But I'm the high priest, how can I leave easily? Aisha decisively refused. As the high priest of the Sovereign Starman, she is responsible for her planet. Although all she has to do every day is simply sit on the throne in a daze. If it weren't too boring, I'm afraid she wouldn't have such a bold idea, and she was reviewing historical knowledge with Lulin. How big a deal, don't you have a candidate high priest? Lulin didn't care. For example, a position such as the high priest usually has one or more spare options. In case something goes wrong, let people go up in time. Lu Lin knew this very well. It's really not okay, let them choose another one. Lu Lin said lightly. Aren't you okay all day anyway? Could it be that without you, Sovereign collapsed directly? The role of the high priest is not that great, is it? Although she was very reluctant to admit it, Aisha thought about it carefully and found that it really didn't seem to have any effect. The Sovereign starmen have long reached the point of liberating the productive forces. Even foreign wars, for them, are nothing more than game-like behavior. So she, the high priest, is actually a mascot, to put it bluntly. There are alternative high priests, but she has too little experience, and I'm afraid she won't be up to the job of high priest. Aisha was still a little hesitant. If at this time, you encounter an invasion of foreign enemies, as the high priest of the Sawirans, from birth, Aisha was arranged for the future path. The education she received from childhood also taught her that she needed to always put Severin first. It is really difficult for her to abandon her responsibilities and abandon the things she has insisted on since she was a child. After all Severins are set with duties from birth. What they do is the meaning of their existence. But it's time for you to think about yourself. Lu Lin looked at Aisha quietly. Eagles finally need to be honed to fly, and in the universe, this is also an indelible truth. It's time for them to undergo a bit of training. Lu Lin said softly. It's really not okay, isn't there? Still me, there is Asgard, do you still need to worry about the safety of Severin? With me, Sovlin will never have problems, let alone suffer from foreign invasion. Even if you don't believe in my strength, can you still not believe in Asgard's strength? To put it bluntly, in fact, Aisha is not so firm. She just needed an excuse to leave Sauron with peace of mind. Nasty. Aisha's head rested lightly on Lu Lin's chest. That gentle shyness, he just felt it was time to do it again. Soon after, the two sorted out their clothes, and Lu Lin sneaked away from the back of the hall with Aisha. While leaving, Lu Lin also saw Star-Lord taking a few people to do business with the Sovereigns. In order to avoid encumbering Xingju, Lu Lin conveniently brought Xingju and these people on the spaceship. Star-Lord rubbed his hairy head, he still hadn't figured out what was going on right now. What's the situation? Why am I here? Why are you here? Why should we run away? Why are people chasing us? Blue lasers flashed through the window. Lu Lin piloted the spaceship and dodged one attack after another with an extremely thrilling spin. The back and forth rotation made the entire spacecraft unable to control the center of gravity. Everyone's heads were a little cloudy. What the hell is going on here? Tony gripped the ship's railing tightly. Everyone turned their gaze to Lu Lin in unison. Lu Lin glanced at Aisha, who was sitting upright next to him, and smiled sarcastically. Following the direction Lu Lin looked, everyone found that an uninvited guest appeared on the spacecraft. Aisha, Xingju suddenly exclaimed. What the hell? How is she on the spaceship? Who is Aisha? Who is she? What's going on? Why are those people chasing us? Tony asked nervously. Aisha is their high priest. Star-Lord rubbed his head. In order to facilitate the understanding of his companions, Star-Lord made an analogy. You can understand him as the President of the United States. Chapter 31. From now on, Aisha will be our companion. Lu Lin said lightly. You understand, it's the kind of companion you understand. And you, Star-Lord, you should thank me for bringing you out, otherwise you would have been torn to shreds by the Sorvaran people by now. At this time, Xingju didn't care about Lu Lin's interruption of his transaction. Oh my god, you're too powerful. Star-Lord showed a smile that all men understood. You actually conquered the high priest. Tell me how you did it. Saying that, Star-Lord actually leaned in front of Aisha in a humble manner. I really didn't see it, however. Before he finished his sentence, Aisha actually pinched Starju's neck with her backhand. Aisha's strength was surprisingly beaten, and Xingju had no ability to resist at all, so he was pressed to the ground by Aisha. Watch your tone, Aisha said coldly, you should have the most basic respect for me. Lu Lin pretended not to see Star-Lord's pleading eyes. He even whistled calmly. I advise you not to mess with her. Lu Lin beckoned to Aisha. Aisha glanced at Star-Lord with disdain, let go of him, and then got up and came to Lu Lin's side, and sat down obediently. Only here in Lu Lin will she become that little bird like a human being. In front of the others, Aisha is still the high priest. It's outrageous. Xingju looked incredulous. He was a little difficult to accept what was happening in front of him. Is this the charm of Asgard's Protoss? Did you brainwash her? How the hell did you do it? Lu Lin shrugged. I can only say that you can't learn this kind of thing, this is talent. Even Tony had to be somewhat convinced. After all, he didn't even manage a palace maid. Over here, Lu Lin actually abducted even the high priest of the people. Teach me. Xingju looked longing. He really couldn't help it. If I can learn this trick, Lu Lin did not answer. Looking at the rain of bullets outside the window, he was a little impatient. Anyway, these are drones, it doesn't matter if I destroy a little, right? Before Lu Lin started, he also asked Aisha beside him for advice. This, Aisha nodded without hesitation and agreed. It doesn't matter, you do it. Lu Lin snapped his fingers, understood. In the next second, countless magic appeared, and those fleets could not dodge, and instantly turned into fireworks and shattered. In a moment's effort, a large fleet behind him knew that the last drone was left. Looking at the miraculous scene in front of him, Tony opened his mouth wide. How is it done? Dee. Lu Lin did not answer, but used the communication system, connected to the communication system of the last drone he had left behind. Isn't it just a high priest, what a big deal? Lu Lin said helplessly. I took the people away, don't chase them anymore. On the other end of the communicator, the high level of Sovlan Star was going crazy. Listen, is this speaking in human terms? At this time, Aisha's face also appeared in the communicator at this time. In front of everyone, she returned to her previous proud posture. I haven't already left a message, why don't you obey the order? Aisha looked solemn. On the other side of the communicator, the high-level color of Sovereign Star was scolding. Even if they are dissatisfied in their hearts, they dare not show it. High Priest, we are worried that you will be forced to leave. High Priest, we can't live without you. I'm just out for a few days, what's the harm? Aisha said lightly. No, High Priest, absolutely not. How can you stay with these people? These people are lowly. Aisha suddenly snorted coldly. When will it be your turn to dictate to me? If any of you dare to disobey my orders and act without permission. Aisha's face was cold, and Tony could feel the coldness on her body. Of course, I'm not ignoring Sovereign's affairs. If Sovlan Star encounters any problems that cannot be solved, you can still contact me. Aisha pursed her lips. Asgard will help you. With that, Aisha decisively cut off the communication. Subsequently, the last drone was also eliminated by Lu Lin with a wave of his hand. On the Star of Sovlan, a group of high-level faces looked at each other. Although it feels a little outrageous, it seems that it is a bad thing to hug Asgard's lap because of this. Of course, a small chaos must be inevitable. After all, the High Priest said that if he couldn't see it, he would disappear. But all this has nothing to do with Lu Lin and Agatha and others. Lu Lin stretched out, got up and gave up the driver's seat to Tony. Help me look at the point. I have already booked the destination, go back to rest first. After saying that, Lu Lin put his arm around Aisha and swaggered into the room. Xingju looked at Lu Lin's departing back with envy, and the little abacus snapped. Wait a minute, I have a question for you. Lurin glanced at Tony and shrugged. He kissed Aisha lightly on the lips. You go first, wait for me to come to you. Aisha nodded obediently and slowly walked back to the room. From beginning to end, she never looked at everyone in the spaceship. This attitude is not very friendly, but everyone does not care. There aren't a few people here anyway. Besides, Aisha is the high priest and supreme ruler of an entire civilization. None of the people present could compare to her very noble one. Her attitude is also very normal for everyone. Tony came over curiously. How the hell did you conquer this woman? Teach Buddy a few tricks. Tony was really convinced. He finally admitted that he was indeed inferior to Lu Lin. After all, he is the Prince of Asgard. That's right, Tony now believes Lu Lin's words. Are you sure you really want to know? Lu Lin looked strange. Tony bumped his shoulder against Lu Lin with a strange smile. Come on, teach us some experience, don't hide it. When Star-Lord heard this, he also came over. He also wanted to know how to conquer a figure like the High Priest. Lu Lin glanced at everyone. Okay, then I'll tell you. He cleared his throat. It's actually very simple to do this. First of all, you have to be the Prince of Asgard. The two rolled their eyes. Just the first condition, they absolutely cannot meet it, let alone the conditions for the following things. However, Lu Lin did not stop. Or you can last 10 hours. Xingju opened his mouth and widened his eyes, looking incredulous. Waterfa. More than 10 hours, you're not bragging, brother. How is that possible? If you don't believe it, I can't help it, I've already told you the truth. Lu Lin shrugged. No, can she stand it? Star-Lord said in disbelief. 10 hours, is this something that normal organisms can do? The physical fitness is there. Lu Lin said lightly. The genes of good villains have also been optimized for thousands of years, and this tolerance is still there. This is normal. If you can't do it, don't doubt that others can't do it. Lu Lin glanced at Xingju with a grin. As for you, you are a personal attack. Star-Lord said indignantly. You're racist. What's wrong with normal Earth humans? Can't normal Earth humans be shorter? You are discriminating against normal humans. Although I only have 2 or 3 hours, I tell you, human beings are also dignified. Wait, what do you say? How much? Tony was shocked. How long? 2 hours. Waterfa, brother, you're not kidding, are you? What do you mean? Isn't this normal? The excited Star-Lord suddenly quieted down. Are you really a human on Earth? Tony looked at Star-Lord in disbelief. How can normal people come for so long? You know, according to normal biological theory, you are a dysfunction, a disease, and you have to be cured. Tony said indignantly, it is impossible for humans to reach this level. Star-Lord looked at Tony with a strange look. Dude, how long have you been? You leave me alone. Tony opened Star-Lord's hand. He is not a human, he is the so-called Asgard Protoss, I can completely understand. But if you're human, you simply can't do this. Don't say it, I see what you mean. Star-Lord patted Tony's shoulder sympathetically. Yes, you are right, it is indeed the level of a normal human being. In Lu Lin's previous life films, Star-Lord seems to be a comedian, a proper short loser. But in fact, Xingju has his own capital. Otherwise, in the original book, Aisha would not have left him. After all, Aisha has never seen anyone who has to spend the spring festival with this guy Xingju. In addition, if Star-Lord was really useless, how could Gamora be so dead set on him? If Gamora can also be described by personality charm, then before meeting Gamora, Star-Lord was also a famous merry genius in the universe. The alien race with whom he spent Spring Eve, to put it bluntly, was not much different from the number of model girls he slept with Tony. It is enough to see that Star-Lord still has his own charm. Of course, capital is also a very important point. After all, Star-Lord's father is also an old stallion, and he keeps breeds everywhere in the universe. If his ability was not strong, it is estimated that he would have been squeezed dry by women of various races. Dragons give birth to dragons, phoenixes give birth to phoenixes, and the son of a mouse will make holes. In this case, it is also quite normal for Star-Lord to surpass normal humans in some aspects. You know a fart. Tony was indignant. Either you're sick or you're not human at all. There is no other possibility. Tony's self-confidence has taken a huge hit. After coming to the universe, he realized that what he was proud of was nothing. After all, the current Tony is not the Iron Man who can be compared to the gods with a mortal body. Now he is just an ordinary person who is slightly smarter. When everything he was proud of was placed in the universe, but it was nothing, Tony felt that the whole person was not good. Especially in terms of nightlife, even an Earthling is not comparable. Tony said that he is completely unacceptable. I'm really a genuine, like a fake Earthling, I definitely won't lie to you. Star-Lord swore to the sky. I was stolen from the Earth when I was in my teens, don't I know if I'm an Earthling? Tony was speechless for a moment, but he still wouldn't admit it. Okay, I admit it, right. What's the head office? Tony said indignantly, you are clearly not. Lu Lin looked at the two arguing and snickered in his heart. Star-Lord thought he was a normal human, but in fact he wasn't at all. His father was a celestial god race, and it was normal for him to be different from ordinary people in some ways. To really say, the only human being on Earth present is Tony alone. Okay, don't play with you, I'll go with my little girl. Lu Lin left everyone with a dashing back, waved his hand and stopped talking. Not long after, there was a sound of silence in his house. At first, everyone was a little disdainful. But after 6 hours, Xingju looked stunned. How many times is this? Is this really what normal creatures can achieve? Tony rubbed his somewhat swollen temples. It's so tortuous. Next time I come out with her, be sure to add the best soundproofing to his room, it's too tortuous. From a biological point of view, it's not scientific at all. Tony muttered in his mouth. He decided to develop relevant human modification technologies after he returned. He wants men all over the world to stop worrying about their size and time. This is a great cause for the benefit of all mankind. To this end, Tony even deliberately stole some of Star-Lord's genetic samples. He wanted to see what was the difference between this person's genes and normal humans, so that he could actually hold out for such a long time. Lu Lin walked out of the house satisfied. Why are you looking at me like that? Lu Lin was a little uncomfortable being stared at by everyone. Smaller next time. Xingju sighed. Everyone is very tormented. Rao. Is Lu Lin's thick skin like a city wall, and he has never cared about this, but he also feels a little embarrassed at this time. Next time I go out, I'll get you a new soundproofing. Tony rolled his eyes and said helplessly. Ha, I know, Tony is just simply inferior. Xingju laughed loudly on the side. What kind of inferiority? Normal human things, how can it be called inferiority? Stark blushed. Besides, compared to Lulin, you're not much better. Then there was a burst of difficult topics such as human limits and normal creatures, and the spacecraft was suddenly filled with happy air. This time out, Lulin can be described as full of harvest. In addition to the magical materials he needed, he even brought back a high priest. But how to place the high priest has become a headache for Lulin. First of all, she certainly can't be taken to Earth. Not to mention how harsh Aisha is for the environment and food, her golden skin alone is not suitable for appearing on Earth. At least not right now. Maybe in the future, more than a decade later, everyone will not mind these after they are familiar with superhero supervillains. Otherwise, if Aisha appears on the Earth now, she will definitely be watched and even coveted by people with intentions. Although Aisha is a high priest, her own strength is average. Speaking of which, Hydra can be captured by sending a random team of agents. Of course, Lulin could ask Aisha to cover her golden skin. But it was clear that Aisha could not accept such a thing. So after thinking about it, Lulin decided to arrange Aisha in Asgard first. He is definitely going to spend some more time on Earth. However, with the Rainbow Bridge there, he can rush back to Asgard to meet Aisha at any time, and he doesn't have to worry about meeting. Moreover, letting Aisha live in the royal palace in Asgard is not a wronged person. That's Asgard, after all. Lulin was even less worried that Aisha would have a conflict with Odin and the others. Although Aisha was a little arrogant, she still had a clear sense of proportion. No matter how you look at it, having Aisha in Asgard is a brilliant choice. Definitely not because Lulin was afraid to face the Asura field of Sif and Aisha, absolutely not. Not long after Sovereign left, Lulin separated from Star-Lord. Star-Lord didn't plan to return to Earth. After all, there were no more people there he valued. He has no father and his mother died young, so Star-Lord has no nostalgia for Earth. And courage will not just let Star-Lord leave. Although Star-Lord had long wanted to go it alone, he was still a little too young to have a chance to completely escape from Yongdu's hands. Before that, he had tried to escape many times, but each time failed. So, this time, he was ready to plan well, and then completely escape from Yongdu. On the other hand, Aisha had no problem with being placed in Asgard. After all, it was Asgard, who ruled the 9 realms, and even in the entire universe, it was a famous existence. The royal palace in Asgard must be better than when he was a high priest. What's more, Asgard also has a rainbow bridge, and the two can meet at any time, and Aisha doesn't care at all. For the woman brought back by their children, Odin and Frigga both smiled and said nothing. When the children grow up, they are very happy. Among the children, the one who satisfied them the most was Lulin. Several of Lulin's siblings are less reassuring than the other. Needless to say, Hela, the goddess of death, has been directly suppressed. Thor is busy fighting all day, Loki is sneaky all day. In short, there is no reassuring existence. There is only Lulin, who is very sensible. Now that the woman has been brought back, Odin and Frigga are even more satisfied. If an heir can be born early, it will be a good thing for the whole of Asgard. After all, Asgard is also a traditional succession power. Even if Asgard now has an heir, what if something happens to it? So it is naturally a good thing to have an heir. So Odin and Frigga's satisfaction with Lulin no longer needs to be said. As for the little problem in Aisha, they didn't care at all. On the contrary, it is more majestic in this way, so that there is the majesty of the motherly world. In short, Odin and Frigga are still very satisfied with Aisha. After settling Aisha down, Lurin left with Tony, who is still in love with Asgard. Tony also wants to stay in Asgard to study Asgard's magic and technology, but at Lulin's request, Tony honestly follows back to Earth. Lulin didn't bother to Tony's heart. In case Tony makes a mess in Asgard, he'll have to come and wipe Tony's ass. Lulin didn't bother to wipe Tony's ass. After returning to Earth, Tony plunged into the lab and began to study the various technologies he had seen before. This trip to the universe had a great impact on him. Now Tony is much more modest and less arrogant. But at the same time, his sense of crisis also appeared. What he saw in the universe made him realize that the Earth was not safe at all. Therefore, he began to study weapons, research weapons that could allow the Earthlings to protect themselves. Not long after returning to Earth, Lulin received a call from Fury. "What are you bumping? Octopus versus Lizardmen?" Several question marks popped up on Lulin's head. "Stop talking nonsense, hurry up and help me solve those monsters, the people under me can't stand it anymore." Fury yelled loudly on the other side of the phone. Lulin rubbed his somewhat head-itched head, got up and flew out. From a distance, Lulin saw the billowing black smoke in the middle of the city. After arriving at the place, Lulin couldn't help but be a little stunned. Fury is still too conservative. This is an octopus and lizardman battle. This is dozens of octopus and dozens of lizardmen engaged in a big brawl. Waterfa, where did these monsters come from? Dr. Octopus and Lulin the lizardman know. But where did so many lizardmen and Dr. Octopus come from? Lizardman he can understand, maybe Spider-Man's classic villain Dr. Connor made it, but where did so many octopus monsters come from? If Lulin remembers correctly, Dr. Octopus should be only one. But where did Dr. Octopus come from with so many sabotage right now? What's more, according to the current rhythm, this Marvel universe is the cinematic universe seen by Lulin in the previous life. But there are no supervillains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Lizardman and Dr. Octopus. Lizardman and Dr. Octopus are not the stuff of the same series of Spider-Man movies at all. It seems that this universe is different from any universe that Lulin is familiar with, and there may not be much of the plot he knows that can be used. Seeing a group of monsters that were fighting, Lulin only felt speechless for a while. Aren't you all supervillains? Shouldn't you unite against the spiders, and why are you fighting in New York City now? Seeing that more and more people were injured, and Fury's agents had begun to hold on, Lulin knew that it was time to make a move himself. He instantly rushed into the group of monsters, and instantly shot a red magic from the palm of his hand. The monster's limbs touched by that magic instantly melted, emitting an unpleasant burning smell. Even if they just rub it a little, these monsters will be in pain and instantly lose their ability to fight. Where did these monsters come from? Lulin was very upset. How long have I only been away from the Earth? Why is the world so chaotic? If I'm not mistaken, it's a product of the lab. Fury's voice came from inside the headphones. First the Hulk, then the octopus and the lizardmen. Fury was a little helpless. If you want to eliminate all these things, then the only way to ban illegal biological laboratories around the world. Oh, and those that are legal and unsafe must also be banned. It's not safe to do that, it's better to shut down all the labs so that there is no danger. Hearing this, Lulin was also a little helpless. This is simply impossible. In all of New York, the largest and most conspicuous laboratory is located in the Stark Building. If you want to ban the laboratory in New York, you must first ban the laboratory in the Stark Building. But what state Stark is now, it is a time of crisis. At this time, if you don't let him develop weapons, it's better to kill him directly. But soon Lu Lin put it behind him. Anyway, these are none of his business, nor are they things he needs to worry about. Forget it. Can you find the source of those monsters? Soon, Lu Lin wiped out all those monsters. In order to avoid the future, he decided to find the lair of these monsters and then hunt them down. The source that can be locked at the moment is the sewers. Fury sent Lu Lin a positioning. Sewer. Lu Lin's brows frowned slightly. No matter where the sewer is, the smell inside will not smell very good. Excrement of various living things, swill. Everything you can think of and can't think of can be found in the sewers. While that doesn't mean he can't stand it, no one wants to fight in a place full of stench. It can be said that the current chaos still needs to be resolved. Lu Lin drove his search magic, circling around New York City without finding any clues. This made him feel a little strange. He clearly saw that these monsters were crawling out of the sewers, which showed that Fury gave the approximate range. But Lu Lin couldn't find their source. Lu Lin felt that something was wrong. So he returned again and carefully scouted in the direction he saw the monster for the first time. Soon, he noticed something unusual. Along New York's subway lines, Lu Lin soon found traces of these monsters. Following these traces, Lu Lin quickly found the production base of those monsters. It was a narrow aisle near the subway tracks, and there was a small room hidden in the aisle, which seemed to be where subway maintenance workers stored their tools. Now, this place has been completely opened up, expanded, and turned into a huge monster manufacturing base. The base is full of unconscious humans, and next to these unconscious humans, there are these terrifying-looking machines. Every once in a while, a comatose person is injected with a yellow-green injection. In a few moments, this person will turn into a lizard man who only knows how to kill. After being unconscious for a while, these lizard men will quickly crawl to the ground along the tunnel next to them and begin to wreak havoc. It turns out that these lizard men are all transformed by humans. Lu Lin was suddenly furious. This is something he absolutely cannot endure. Before he could kill the killer without scruples, no one knew the identity of these lizard men. But now knowing that these lizard men were transformed from innocent humans, Lu Lin's heart was angry. Of course, he doesn't feel that this is his fault, that he killed those people. Only a fool would think so. What really kills these people is the people who turn them into lizard monsters. Lu Lin instantly destroyed the base where the monster was produced. Since the lizard men appeared in this form, it is likely that the countless octopus-like monsters were produced in the same way. Lu Lin believes that since the production base of the lizard man is here, the production base of the octopus monster must not be far away. Sure enough, searching along the clues of the subway, Lu Lin quickly found Dr. Octopus's production base. After destroying these production units, Lu Lin felt a little bad. Things seem to be solved, but the question is, who made these devices, and who put them here? And what is their purpose? And, the lizard man and Dr. Octopus, shouldn't their enemy be Spider-Man? How did it become what it is now? Is this the so-called butterfly effect? After a moment, Lu Lin stopped thinking about the mess. Now it is of no use at all for a person to think about these things here. The priority is to find the two people, Dr. Octopus and Lizardman. Otherwise, God knows what kind of moth they will make. After flying out of the subway tunnel, Lu Lin contacted Fury again. Things have been settled. Fury breathed a sigh of relief. What the hell is going on? Lu Lin told the story of what he had seen in the underground tunnel. What? There is actually such a thing. Do you know something? Lu Lin asked with a frown. Fury said with some uncertainty, I have a guess, not sure if it's right. In short, you don't need to worry about this matter, it is not in your category now, just leave the rest to me. As soon as Lu Lin heard it, he knew that someone from the military or government must have intervened. Since this is a matter within them, it has nothing to do with Lu Lin. Lu Lin, who returned to the bar, was unconsciously a little weak when he faced Sif. After all, he brought back a woman after he went out, and the point is that Sif didn't know about it. Seeing Sif Mary's appearance of helping him clean up the bar, Lulin suddenly felt a little guilty in his heart. Just when Lulin had a headache about how to deal with the relationship between Aisha and Sif, and hesitated whether to confess to Sif. In the sewers of Manhattan, Dr. Octopus and Lizardman are secretly discussing something. Before, you promised that this plan was foolproof, but now it's all exposed. We are also exposed. The Lizardman roared, his sharp claws glowing with cold light, as if he could make a move at any moment. Kurt Connors, Dr. Octopus said viciously, pay attention to your attitude. If there is still a trace of sanity in your poor head, you should know to be polite to me. Dr. Octopus is also very hot-tempered and is not used to each other at all. Although the Lizardman's current state of IQ is worrying, the most basic judgment is still there. He was only venting his dissatisfaction, howling twice and then no longer speaking. Shut up, Dr. Octopus said angrily. Now that there are people searching for us outside, if you don't want to be locked up as an experiment, teach me to control your emotions. Okay, I'll listen to you. The Lizardman took a deep look at Octavius, and then slowly changed into a human form. Guys, Dr. Octopus cursed secretly, and then manipulated his tentacles to shut up Dr. Connors, who had changed back into human form. What's going on? How am I here? When he woke up, Connors looked horrified, completely unaware of what had happened. Especially when he saw an octopus freak standing in front of him, the fear in his heart reached its peak. I knew this was going to happen. Dr. Octopus scolded secretly. Idiot, think about what is going on, you know it yourself. Perhaps many people are familiar with Dr. Connors, but in this universe, Dr. Connors's life experience has changed a little. Kurt Connors was a distinguished military doctor who made many achievements in the field of medicine. During the war, he was in charge of surgery, and it is worth mentioning that this war was a war of aggression abroad, yes, the famous Vietnam War. Soon after, Connors suffered irreparable injuries in an attack, for which he had to choose to amputate his leg and be sent back to the United States to recuperate. Since then, Connors has been experimenting in college. He gave up surgical research because he discovered that reptiles are extremely regenerative, so he began desperately studying the DNA of reptiles. Because he decided that the reptile's strong ability to regenerate severed limbs allowed his arms to grow again. Not only to restore his severed arm, but also to be able to create human regenerative limbs for medical treatment. This time, he had almost no funding, and all his experiments were done in university labs. Finally, he succeeded in developing a plasma extracted from reptile DNA. Connors then couldn't wait to experiment with a rabbit with a broken foot. The result was so successful that the rabbit quickly grew back to that foot it had lost. It was around this time that he learned that Dr. Octavius had developed a tentacle that could completely replace the human limb. Curious, he connected with Octavius. But soon, Connors discovered the flaws in Dr. Octopus's research. That's too expensive. This is not at all a price that an ordinary university professor can afford. But seeing Dr. Octopus's limbs, which are much more convenient than those of able-bodied people, Connors said he didn't want it to be fake. He also showed Octavius his research results, but Octavius immediately saw the flaws in his research. Influenced by the tentacles, Octavius has long been no longer the mild-mannered doctor. At this time, he became snarky and became vicious. Connors' research was devalued by him. In order to prove that there was no problem with his research, Connors did not even do another successful experiment, and directly injected the extract into his body. What happened afterwards can be imagined. The extract changed in Connors's body, and he turned into a lizardman in just half an hour. After turning into a lizardman, Connors had only one thought left in his mind, which was to prove himself right. Because his arms did grow. And Dr. Octopus saw a lizard monster coming to the door, and what he had to do was naturally to fight back first. The two can also be regarded as not fighting and not acquainted. When Connors transforms back into human form, the two enter into an in-depth exchange. If it was Octavius before installing the tentacles, he would definitely dissuade Connors from experimenting. Because after changing back to human form, Connors's arm returned to its previous appearance. It worked, but not completely. But now, he's no longer the mild-mannered Dr. Octavius, he's now Dr. Octopus. Reassured by Dr. Octopus, Connors injected a large dose of the extract again. This allows Connors to have a full arm under normal conditions. But too much extraction allowed Connors to split into another personality. The other is evil, which belongs only to the personality of the lizardman. Now that Connor's split personality is not particularly serious, after returning to his human form, Connors can quickly recall the previous events. But as it is now, either the two personalities merge with each other, or the two personalities will split completely. The lizardman is the lizardman, and Dr. Connors is Dr. Connors. Connors, on the other hand, will also lose all memories of the lizardmen. This may have something to do with the body's own defense mechanisms, but Dr. Octopus didn't bother to study them. Anyway, it's not him who gets hurt, as long as Connors is useful. Drink this reagent, you may feel better. Dr. Octopus's tentacle handed a reagent to Connors. Connors hesitated, but drank it anyway. Dr. Octopus said nothing, but at least the two of them still had a trace of so-called conscience. Just like the monsters created before, they are also using death row prisoners who are about to be disposed of, not innocent ordinary humans. This may be their only remaining conscience. Including now, Dr. Octopus said that he didn't care about Dr. Connors, but he still specially made a reagent for him to relieve his mood. Of course, since Dr. Octopus's main research direction is physics rather than biology, the effectiveness of the potions he made is actually limited. But that's enough for Connors now. After drinking the reagent, Connors regained some sanity. Oh my God, what have we done? Thinking back to what he had done before, Connors couldn't help but feel a little broken. Turning a living person into that kind of monster, even if the other party is already a death row prisoner, is not something Connors can accept. Shut up. Dr. Octopus was a little impatient. This was actually done with Connors' consent, and even the machine that could transform people into lizard monsters and octopus monsters was made with Connors' help. Yes, the octopus monster looks a bit like mechanical technology, but it is actually genetically modified by the octopus. After all, Dr. Octopus's octopus tentacles are very expensive to build, and with so many monsters, it is impossible for him to arrange a mechanical tentacle for everyone. Those monsters are the product of complete biotechnology. As for why they did it, the answer is simple: this is an arms show. Its main purpose is to showcase the results of their biotechnology research. Dr. Octopus's experimental funds had run out, and in this case, someone came to the door and said that they could provide them with research funding. But only if they provide all the research results. Connors didn't care, but Dr. Octopus certainly couldn't agree to that request. After some wrangling, the other party finally agreed to purchase the research results of the two of them, but on the condition that they show their research results. Those executed prisoners were also provided to them by the other side. But it turned out that there was a slight problem with their experiment. The biological weapons created by the two of them not only do not have their own intelligence, but also have an extremely short lifespan. During combat, the lifespan of these defective products will also be rapidly reduced. No one else needs to do anything, just intense activity, and in less than 3 hours at most, these monsters will be violently killed on the spot and turned into a puddle of mud. The monsters produced in this way naturally do not meet the requirements of those people. Moreover, their move also attracted Fury's attention, which directly caused those people to terminate their cooperation. In order to prove himself, and to be able to establish another collaboration and secure his research funding, Dr. Octopus decided to conduct another experiment. Only if this experiment is successful, they have the possibility to continue their research. Otherwise, they can only use forcible robbery to fund their own research and research materials. Connors, who had drunk the reagent, was much more emotionally stable, and his expression gradually began to become gloomy. "Thank you, I'm much better." "Well, did you find out who did it?" Connors struggled to get out of his seat. "Not yet, this man is too mysterious to know where he came from. Dr. Octopus has some headaches. If you want to show your experimental results again, the best experimental subject is undoubtedly the guy who wiped out all their experimental objects before." "What kind of monster is that? Is it really human?" Dr. Octopus frowned. "Maybe it's some kind of human with special abilities. You should have seen some of them after so many years of research." Connors said lightly, "The water in this world is much deeper than we think." "I know, but I've never seen someone so capable of fighting." Dr. Octopus said helplessly, "Could it be, is he a mutant?" Mutants. Connors nodded slightly. He had also heard some related news about mutants. Probably a super mutant like Magneto. It would be nice if it were a mutant. Dr. Octopus nodded slightly. Those people gave me reagents that can suppress the X gene, and with these, it is estimated that he can limit his mutant genes. X gene. What is that? Connors said suspiciously. Mutants are not very vocal in society now, and many people don't even know about the existence of mutants. And the genetic research on mutants is cutting-edge technology, and there are not many people who understand this aspect of this thing. The X gene is now a cutting-edge study that is still unknown. It's normal that Connors doesn't understand this. Found it. Dr. Octopus's eyes lit up. Let me see who you really are. Ha, a bar owner. Dr. Octopus smirked. Things are getting interesting. What, are you saying that the monsters have reappeared and come to my bar? Lu Lin cursed. Didn't you say you don't have to worry about me? What are you all doing all these days? Lu Lin was not at all surprised that these monsters could find themselves. After all, when he first appeared, he was not masked. Anyway, he didn't have any important people on Earth, and even if those people wanted to take revenge on him, they could only find him in person. Besides, hiding your head and showing your tail is not the style of the Asgardians at all. Lu Lin was angry that Fury told him to leave it alone, and it turned out that it had been a week, and they hadn't caught the monsters yet. What made him most angry was that these monsters were actually clearly coming to take revenge on him. That's what you said, don't worry. Lu Lin cursed. You better let the guests in your bar take refuge first. On the other hand, Fury is also very troubled. It's not that he hasn't done anything for a week, but in the end, he always feels a resistance that prevents him from investigating. So for a week, he didn't have any results of his investigation. By this time, Fury had realized that there was enemy infiltration within them. But the priority is to deal with the attack of these monsters first, and as for what happens after that, we will talk about it later. Let Sif evacuate the guests of the bar, and Lu Lin rushes directly out of the bar. Although he is rich now, he still does not want to fight in the bar. After all, the decoration in the bar was carefully selected by him and Sif, and he didn't want to ruin the bar. After rushing out, these monsters instantly followed, which made Lu Lin and Fury breathe a sigh of relief at the same time. But while fighting, Lu Lin sensed that something was wrong. Although these monsters are also vulnerable to him, their strength has obviously increased a lot, and they also have a certain amount of wisdom. During the battle, Lu Lin also noticed that the other party seemed to want to lure him to another place. Let me see what you're planning. Lu Lin pretended not to know and was taken outside the city by these people. So it's you. Lu Lin looked at the two in front of him with a smile. Oh no, it was two monsters. Connors spat out the forked letter and said coldly, you know us. You all know me, why can't I know you? Seeing these two monsters, Lu Lin's memories of his previous life were all recalled. A Dr. Octopus, a Dr. Lizard, these two deeply rooted images, how could he forget? Lu Lin even remembered the names of both of them, Octavius and Connors. If I'm not mistaken, both of them are highly respected doctors, how could they be so embarrassed? None of your business. Dr. Octopus sneered. But now, you are in our way, so I'm sorry, you should die. Who gave you the courage to think that you are my opponent? Lu Lin's gaze was cold. No matter what kind of tragic experience the other party had, but now they want to do it to themselves. Since he wanted to do it to himself, then Lu Lin would definitely not show mercy to their subordinates. Don't measure yourself. Is it self-sufficient? You will soon find out. Dr. Octopus's tentacles quietly clicked a key on the computer's keyboard. A stream of reagents that turned into mist instantly sprayed onto Lu Lin's face. Lu Lin curiously wiped the mist on his face. What is it? Looking at the motionless Lu Lin, the lizard man couldn't help but be a little worried. Is this going to work? Definitely, I calculated exactly. Dr. Octopus has a good idea. I've done experiments and collected enough data, and this reagent is absolutely useful, so there will be absolutely no problems. It's just that Dr. Octopus never considered the possibility that maybe Lu Lin wasn't a mutant at all. Lu Lin shook his head in disappointment. If it's just like this, then I'm going to be polite. Don't worry, the show is still to come. Dr. Octopus smiled wickedly. To be on the safe side, in addition to these reagents that can inhibit the X gene, he also prepared numerous traps waiting for Lu Lin. In the next second, he activated the trap. At the same time, several instruments around Lu Lin were also charged, and in the next second, several electromagnetic pulses were activated, sweeping Lu Lin's body one after another. In the next second, countless attack methods swarmed towards Lu Lin: lasers, poison gas, bombs, firearms, everything, one after another. These traps bombarded Lu Lin for more than 10 minutes. Among them, the most critical role is the special inhibitor. These traps are full of special inhibitors to ensure that these traps for ordinary people can also work. These inhibitors, whether inhaled or injected, even a small amount, can quickly suppress the mutant X gene to a very low level in a very short time. It can be said that when a mutant encounters this inhibitor, it is like encountering a Superman of kryptonite, and there is no ability to resist at all. In addition to these, Dr. Octopus also added a huge amount of neurotoxins and anesthetics to the poison gas. He had only one goal, that is, to completely kill Lu Lin. As for the combat data of his experiments, they had already been collected on the way here just now. All he needs to think about now is how to collect Lurin's body so that he can conduct a complete genetic experiment. Is that all you have? Lu Lin came out of the smoke unscathed. The electronic pulse traps used to limit him seemed empty in front of Lu Lin and did not affect him at all. You guys made such a big fight, that's it. The next moment, all the traps around them shattered. I have to say that after turning into monsters, your IQ has also dropped a lot, doctors. Lu Lin said lightly, bind your hands. No, it can't be. Dr. Octopus was crazy, and he rushed directly towards Lu Lin. Obviously, he could not accept that his careful planning had all gone down the drain. However, how could Dr. Octopus be Lu Lin's opponent? After only one round, Dr. Octopus was subdued by Lu Lin and lost consciousness. The tentacles behind him still tried to move autonomously, but those tentacles were as ridiculously weak as a toddler's arm in front of Lu Lin's magic. In just an instant, Lu Lin subdued them all. But the next second, looking at Dr. Octopus, what to do with him, Lu Lin was a little difficult. Let's say kill him, but Dr. Octopus didn't do anything too much, or rather, he didn't have time to do anything harmful. As for the so-called transformer before, Lu Lin had already learned from Fury that those who were transformed were just death row prisoners. Lu Lin did not care about the life or death of these death row prisoners. Therefore, at least here in Lu Lin, Dr. Octopus is definitely not guilty of death. But letting him go is also absolutely impossible. After thinking about it, Lu Lin decided to give Dr. Octopus to Tony to solve. If Lu Lin remembers correctly, the former life of Dr. Octopus was restored to normal with the help of the high-tech manufacturing machine left by Tony. Now that Tony himself is here, it's not difficult to get him back to normal, probably. If it doesn't go back to normal, then talk about it later. And looking at Dr. Octopus's technology, I think Tony can also draw a lot of inspiration from it. Fact, I knew that guy was unreliable. The lizard man cursed Dr. Octopus fiercely in his heart. This companion was not reliable at all, saying that it was foolproof, and as a result, he was killed without any resistance. As for him, he sensed the danger early, and as early as when Lu Lin got out of that trap, he found an opportunity to slip away directly. Just when Dr. Lizard thought he had escaped, Lu Lin slowly descended from the sky and appeared in front of him. You think you can escape? Lu Lin smiled faintly. As early as when he saw the two, Lu Lin put a tracking mark on them, ensuring that these two people would not escape his palm. I surrender. Dr. Lizard knelt directly and begged for mercy, without the backbone of being a villain at all. This is the end of Lu Lin. Bian, I accept your surrender. Lu Lin did not give the two to Fury. Shield, no, should now be called Serpent Shield. You don't have to think about what will happen to them if you hand Connors and Dr. Octopus over. The results of the two of them will definitely be taken away and used by Hydra in the end. Although Lu Lin was not afraid of the so-called Hydra, he did not want to cause trouble for himself. So he was going to leave these two to Tony to settle. Although I don't know if Tony can solve the problems of these two people now, Lu Lin feels that these are small problems. After all, Tony is a genius among geniuses, even if he is not yet complete. But to crack the two men's technology and fix the flaws in it, Lulin believes that this should be a small problem for Tony. When Lurin arrived at Stark Tower, Tony was still asleep. Obviously, he had a good time last night. Hey, wake up. Lulin snapped his fingers, and Tony suddenly sobered up. The sleepy-eyed Tony looked at Lulin and cried out in dissatisfaction. Hey, Lulin, you can't just break into my room with 2 men. Tony was stunned. Wait, Waterfa, how did you get in? Lulin smiled and pointed to the window next to him. No, this is the 81st floor. Tony rubbed his temples. Forget it, what are you here for? Lulin pointed to the 2 unconscious people on the ground. I want you to help me solve these 2 people. What's going on with the 2 of them? Tony looked curiously at the 2 people lying unconscious on the floor. What kind of person are you, who actually let you ask for someone? They're not my people. Lulin shook his head and said. It's just 2 poor people who went astray, and I just want to help them. Lulin said lightly. Of course, if you are not willing to help, then I can only give it to S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D. Lulin patted his head, and he remembered that Tony did not know the existence of S.H.I.E.L.D. now. It's probably similar to the existence of the government and the military. You know, it's the FBI, the CIA. The technology and knowledge of the 2 of them, what will happen if it falls into the hands of those people, you probably know without me saying. My good brother, you really gave me a problem. Tony rubbed his temples. Although he is arrogant, although he has a cool temperament, he is definitely not the kind of person who is indifferent to visible suffering. But anything that goes beyond his bottom line, he will shoot. What do you think I am? Why should I help them? Tony said indignantly. There are more people who need help under the sky, can I finish helping? With that, Tony got up and began to study the tentacles behind Dr. Octopus. Good, very interesting technology. Tony glanced through the scanner at the tentacles behind Dr. Octopus. Simple artificial intelligence, just some problems with programming. How can you fix it? Lulin glanced at Tony. Hey, you're insulting me. Tony said dissatisfied. You should have asked me if I needed a few hours to solve it, not if I could fix it. Okay, then you can do it in a few hours. Lulin followed Tony's words. About 3 hours, Tony said with a shrug. You just need to roughly modify the connection method of the circuit and reprogram the tentacles. Lulin nodded as if he didn't understand. So, what is his problem? It's a neurological problem, Tony said as he moved his hands. His programming was so bad that the tentacles were a little disobedient, and the technology of this tentacle was also primitive, connecting directly to his spine and then deep into his brain. Whenever he uses his tentacles, those excessively strong biocurrents stimulate his cerebral cortex, and it feels like dozens of people buzzing in your ears. Tony smashed his mouth. It's quite surprising that he hasn't become a vegetative person yet. And the artificial intelligence of this tentacle, the architecture is really a little too backward, and this tentacle added together, it will make people feel that their heads are buzzing. No matter how stoic people are, they will quickly go crazy. So, just add a little bit of resistance, and then, re-architect it. Ah, okay, solved. Tony glanced at the time. 2 hours, 8 minutes and 3 seconds, how about this speed? As he spoke, Tony solved the problem of Dr. Octopus's tentacles. While this results in a 30% reduction in the output power of the tentacles, security is the most important, isn't it? And what about this guy? Lurin pointed to Connors on the side. What's wrong with him? What's going on? As he spoke, Connors turned into the green lizard monster again in a coma. However, as soon as he finished his transformation, Lulin punched the opponent's head. The lizard man did not have any ability to resist and directly passed out again. You see it, Lulin said lightly. Hiss, this is a bit of a hassle. Tony frowned. I'm not an expert in genetics, I need a while to study it slowly. Connors also happened to wake up at this time, and hearing Tony's words, he couldn't help but say, give up. Impossible, hopeless, I'll never be able to return to my original form. Connors said with some despair, I will only become a fool who only knows how to kill and has no head. Don't measure the world of genius by your standards. Tony said lightly. If you don't believe it, we can make a bet. But, Connors was silent for a moment. My arm. Don't think about your arm, it will probably have to be removed. Tony stretched and said, I think the root cause is your arm. Just Now, Tony had fully understood Connor's past. So he now has some basic judgments. Then I'll wait for your good news. In order to avoid Tony's harm, Llewellyn stayed at Tony's house for the past 2 days, watching him conduct research on Connors. Prior to this, Tony's research on gene-related technologies was not deep. After all, his main research direction was mechanical physics. But he is a genius after all, and when developing new weapons, he often uses some bionic principles, and Tony occasionally conducts some genetic research. Therefore, the problem that Connors encountered was not a problem in Tony's eyes at all. In just 2 days, Tony had all his problems solved, indicating that Connors could return to being carefree at any time. But the only problem is that his arm, which grew because of the lizard's genes, may not survive. But it's still speculation. How it is, you have to try it before you know. In contrast, Dr. Octopus now has a very mixed feeling. Dr. Octavius has been working on small, controlled nuclear fusion. But now, nuclear fusion is not fully mastered, let alone small anti-nuclear fusion. But when Octavius saw the large reactor with controlled nuclear fusion in the Stark building, Octavius learned that Tony's research was ahead of him. And this is just Tony's casual hand, not his real intention. In comparison, Octavius' research seems so ridiculous. After working hard all his life, in the end, only one mechanical tentacle was useful, but even so, this mechanical tentacle Tony only looked at it twice and studied it thoroughly. Tony even perfected his technical flaws and got himself back to normal. In the face of this situation, no matter who it is inevitable that there will be some melancholy. People are not the same as people, look at the opening. Llewellyn gently patted Dr. Octopus's shoulder and comforted him softly. Llewellyn smiled and said, "Actually, Tony also admires you very much. Your research inspired him a lot, Dr. Octavius." Octavius just drilled the tip of the bull's horn and saw that he was back to normal, and Llewellyn didn't mind pulling him. If someone had pulled him in the original book, Octavius would not have come to this point. After listening to Llewellyn's comfort, Octavius was noticeably much more relaxed. "Call me Dr. Octopus." Dr. Octopus smiled slightly. "This reminds me not to forget the mistakes I made before." He felt like he had completely looked away. Llewellyn nodded in satisfaction. His comfort was finally not in vain. On the other hand, Connor's treatment is nearing completion. With the help of Tony, the lizardman gene in his body was quickly cleared, and Connors returned to his previous appearance. It's just that genetics are really not what Tony is good at. Connors still has a lot of hidden dangers in his body, which is not clear. This makes Connor's physique much more than ordinary people, and it also gives him the possibility of turning back into a lizardman. The rest of the problems need to be solved by Connors himself. Of course, sending the Buddha to the west, Tony did not leave Connors alone, and he also made Connors an artificially sensed arm. From the appearance alone, it is impossible to see the difference between this arm and Connors's original arm. "Connors, how was your experience with your new arm?" Dr. Octopus looked at Connors, and he still had a bit of guilt in his heart for Connors. If he hadn't fooled Connors in the first place, Connors wouldn't have injected so many genetic agents, let alone become the almost irreparable situation he is now. But Connors didn't mind. He was still touching his simulated arm with a look of amazement. "It's amazing. I couldn't tell it was an artificial robotic arm at all." Saying that, Connors touched his face. "This feeling, too real. It's like my normal arm." Tony looked at Connors proudly. "Well, I added a lot of neural sensors to it, and recultivated the simulated skin based on your skin. Except that this arm needs to be replenished with regular power. He is no different from your normal arm," Tony said proudly. "In addition, he can also detect your heart rate and physical condition, and if something happens, he only needs a password, and he can understand and launch first aid for you. Epinephrine, anesthetic, you can choose these reagents, and you can always come to me to replenish them when you run out." Listening to Tony's gushing narration, Connors became more and more satisfied. Although this is still not his real arm, this arm is no different from a normal person when used. As for the flaws in his research, Connors believes that with his own research, he will soon be able to solve them. "Okay, now, let's take a look at your new lab." "Our new lab." The two looked at each other and were stunned. "Would you like to provide us with research funding so we can continue our research?" "Wrong." Tony pointed at the two men. You don't think my services are free, do you? So, Dr. Octopus looked at Tony hesitantly. So, from now on, you will be my employees. The contract Lu Lin has signed for you. The term is 50 years, you only need to work for me for 50 years, after which you can leave freely. And until then, you are all employees of my Stark Industries. You know, many people outside are looking for you now. Let you stay, I also have to take risks. Of course, I can also ignore this, as long as you pay for the treatment. Tony snapped his fingers, and Jarvis immediately billed the two men in the air. Let me see, Octavius, your bill is cheaper, only $30 million, and as for you, Dr. Connors, gee, you're miserable, your bill is $60 million. How? Which path do you choose? Don't be like Tony, we see what you mean. Dr. Octopus smiled helplessly. We are willing to become employees of Stark Industries. That's good. Tony nodded. Come and visit your new lab with me. Tony waved his hand, motioning for the two men to follow. Soon, Connors and Dr. Octopus were shocked. All of them are cutting-edge experimental instruments. Tony stood at the door of the lab, his arms outstretched. This lab is for the two of you. It's you here, it's his over there. Tony waved his hand very grandly. I will arrange the relevant researchers for you soon, you just need to study with peace of mind. You don't need to worry about profitability, you don't need to think about it's useful, you just need to do the research you like. Of course, I don't want more than that. If your research doesn't satisfy me, then I'm sorry, you have to start helping Stark Industries make a profit. Understand, we understand, Connors said excitedly. There could be no richer condition. Even Octavius was shocked by Tony's wealth. Not to mention that Tony helped himself, even before that, for this lucrative condition, Octavius was willing to come and work for Tony. To this, Tony can only say, sorry, money is really able to do whatever you want. Looking at the two people who immediately began to investigate, Tony nodded with satisfaction. How about it, this arrangement, are you still satisfied? Lu Lin nodded slightly. You are a good person, Tony. What good people? I just see that they have good talent and want them to work for me. Tony said hard. Lu Lin smiled slightly. Tony was a dead Tsunere, something he had known for a long time. Duplicitous guy. Therefore, Lu Lin did not poke him at all. Okay, with you, I will be relieved, and in the future, if you need to use my place, you can open your mouth at any time. Lu Lin patted Tony on the shoulder and turned to leave. Hey, listen, Lu Lin, you can't do that. Under the Stark building, Coulson blocked Lu Lin and said helplessly. Those two should be taken in by S.H.I.E.L.D. instead of staying in Stark Mansion to continue their research. You can go ask Stark for someone. Lu Lin gave a narrow smile. Guess if Tony will find out who you are, start investigating you, and find out that your father is actually one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D. Quote, okay, don't go on, let's not talk about it anymore, okay. Coulson said helplessly. If it weren't for Fury's reluctance to involve Tony, he would have let the team lead the rush and arrest people. Fury also expects Latoni to join in the future. If he does this now, there will definitely be no hope of cooperation in the future. As for Dr. Octopus, as long as they don't make any trouble, they can only let them go. When their research fails, and then make trouble, S.H.I.E.L.D. can arrest people in an upright manner. As for now, I can only let Tony and Lu Lin be willful first. Seeing Coulson's helpless departure, Lu Lin smiled and nodded. On the other hand, in the laboratory, after some entanglement and careful consideration, Octavius decided to focus on nanotechnology. Of course, artificial intelligence is also within his research scope, because Tony has inspired him a lot. In addition, he will continue to develop mechanical prosthetics, which he also learned from Tony. He believes that he will one day be able to develop a mechanical prosthetic that is very affordable in terms of practicality and price. Connors, on the other hand, decided to continue his research. Mechanical prosthetics, while feasible, are costly and, ultimately, not your own arm. No matter how similar they are to real arms, these prosthetics cannot truly replace human arms. The mere need to charge will bring great trouble to people's daily lives. So to some extent, two people on the same level have formed a faint competitive relationship. The market for disabled people is still very large, especially in this country where there are a large number of disabled soldiers. Therefore, the research of the two people is still very meaningful. I heard that a company called AIM has recently appeared, which specializes in recruiting disabled soldiers, and the movement is not small. I heard that they are also conducting related gene development research. With competitors, there is naturally motivation. Of course, the research of the two can be transformed into military weapons without hindrance. Just like the tentacles of Dr. Octopus, this kind of thing appears on the battlefield as a complete killer. But none of them will let that happen. After all, their original purpose was only to rehabilitate the disabled. Not long after Lu Lin left, Tony received an invitation. The military's award ceremony, and the signing ceremony. Tony shook his somewhat sore neck. It's time to go out and relax. When Tony woke up, he appeared in a cave inexplicably, and a battery appeared inexplicably on his chest. As for what happened, everyone must know it. With the help of the inner ghost, Tony is ambushed, and even though he has prepared a weapon for self-defense, the energy of his weapon is still somewhat limited. The terrorists' fire was too fierce, and in the end, Tony was knocked unconscious by a missile, and then taken to his lair by the terrorists. Tony was kidnapped. Lu Lin frowned and watched the news on TV. He didn't expect this day to come so quickly. Lu Lin, we need your help. On the other side of the phone came Fury's voice. Tony must not die, I need you to help us find him. Don't worry, Tony will be fine, Lu Lin said lightly. However, he still planned to go out and find Tony to see if he could get him out early. Because the task released by the system has arrived. This time, but there are 5 check-in opportunities, Lu Lin will definitely not give up. It's just that those terrorists hide deeply, and without knowing the target and not knowing the direction, it is still quite difficult to find Tony's traces in a huge desert. 3 days later, Lu Lin keenly noticed an explosion in a corner of the desert and rushed over. Coming here, Lu Lin found Tony eating ash in the desert. Would you like some water? Lu Lin smiled and handed over a bottle of mineral water. I haven't drunk water properly in the past few days. Tony couldn't wait to take the mineral water that Lu Lin handed over and drank it down. By the way, Dr. Yin Sen, go and save him. Tony said sharply. Don't worry, I've arranged everyone. Lu Lin said lightly. After arriving here, Lu Lin cleaned up all the terrorists and sent Ethan to a distant US military base for treatment. That's good, that's good. Tony breathed a sigh of relief. In the base, Tony was saved by Ethan, and if Ethan died, I am afraid that he would not be able to sleep in his life. Is there a cheeseburger? I want a cheeseburger right now. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.